The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain as Master Chief Sarah Martinez adjusted her position on the ridge. Her ghillie suit blended perfectly with the desert scrub, making her nearly invisible against the barren landscape. Through her scope, she could see the compound 3 miles away where intelligence had placed Rashid Hakim, a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks that had claimed the lives of 23 American soldiers in the past 6 months. Sarah had been in position for 14 hours, motionless except for the subtle adjustments needed to track the movement below. Her spotter, Petty Officer Jake Chen, lay beside her with high-powered binoculars, whispering updates through their encrypted radio. The rest of their 8-man SEAL team was positioned around the valley, ready to provide extraction support once the mission was complete. Movement at the north entrance, Chen whispered. Black sedan, 3 occupants. Sarah shifted her scope slightly, watching as figures emerged from the vehicle. The heat shimmer made identification difficult, but her training had taught her patience. In sniper work, rushing meant missing, and missing meant good people died while bad people lived to kill another day. Her radio crackled softly. Overwatch, this is base. Update on target identification. Base, Overwatch. Still waiting for positive ID. Multiple individuals in compound, but no confirmation on primary target. Sarah had joined the SEALs 7 years ago, fighting through every barrier and prejudice to prove that gender meant nothing when it came to protecting American lives. She was one of only 3 women to ever complete the grueling training, and the first to serve as a sniper in active combat operations. Every mission carried extra weight because she knew that her failures would be magnified, used as evidence that women didn't belong in special operations. But her successes spoke louder than her critics. 47 confirmed kills, all legitimate military targets. 3 Bronze Stars and a Silver Star. The respective men who had initially questioned her presence but now trusted her with their lives. Overwatch, we've got thermal signatures showing movement in the main building, came the voice of Lieutenant Commander David Torres, the team leader positioned half a mile to the east. Looks like a meeting of some kind. Sarah adjusted her scope's magnification, studying the compound's layout. The intelligence was solid. This was where Hakim conducted his operations, hidden in a civilian area that made direct assault nearly impossible. The sniper mission was clean, surgical, and would remove a significant threat without civilian casualties. Contact, Chen whispered urgently. Target confirmed. Hakim just entered the courtyard. Sarah's breathing slowed as she tracked the figure through her scope. Rashid Hakim was a tall man with a distinctive limp from an old injury, exactly matching the intelligence photos. He stood in the open courtyard, apparently feeling safe in his remote stronghold. Base, Overwatch. Positive ID on primary target. Clear shot available. Copy, Overwatch. You are cleared hot. Take the shot. Sarah's finger moved to the trigger. Wind was minimal, distance calculated at 2,847 meters. She had made longer shots under worse conditions. She controlled her breathing, finding the natural pause between breaths where her body was perfectly still. The radio crackled again, but this time the voice was different, higher ranking, unfamiliar. All units, all units. Mission abort. Repeat, mission abort. New intelligence indicates civilian presence. RTB immediately. Sarah kept her crosshairs centered on Hakim. Something felt wrong. The intelligence had been thoroughly vetted, the area surveilled for days. There were no civilians in the compound. Base, Overwatch requesting confirmation. Target is isolated, no civilian threat visible. Overwatch, this is Colonel Harrison. You will abort this mission immediately and return to base. That's a direct order. Lieutenant Commander Torres's voice came through the team frequency. You heard the colonel. All teams begin extraction. Overwatch, you're clear to move. Sarah lowered her rifle slightly, confused by the sudden change. In 7 years of operations, she had never seen a mission aborted at the moment of execution without clear justification. Through her scope, she watched Hakim talking with his associates, completely unaware of how close he had come to death. Something's not right, Chen muttered beside her. This whole thing stinks. Sarah began breaking down her rifle, muscle memory guiding her hands while her mind processed the situation. The extraction route would take them through a narrow canyon that provided the only concealed path back to the pickup zone. It was a vulnerable choke point, but it had been cleared and secured by the support team. As they moved down from the ridge, Sarah's radio remained active with chatter from the various team members beginning their withdrawal. Everything seemed routine until she heard Torres's voice, tense and urgent. "Base, Bravo team. We've got vehicles approaching from the east. Multiple technicals with heavy weapons. Looks like we walked into an ambush." The pieces clicked together in Sarah's mind with horrifying clarity. The mission aboard hadn't been about civilian safety, it had been about getting the team into a kill zone. Someone had fed their position to the Taliban, and now they were caught in the open with limited cover and overwhelming enemy forces converging on their location. "All units, this is Torres. Emergency extraction protocol. Charlie and Delta teams, establish defensive positions. Echo team, get to the pickup zone and call for immediate air support." Sarah and Chen were now half a mile from the rest of the team, separated by terrain that would take precious minutes to cross. Through her radio, she could hear the staccato of automatic weapons fire as the ambush unfolded. "Overwatch, this is base. Maintain your current position. Do not attempt to rejoin the main force." The order stopped Sarah cold. In SEAL training, the fundamental principle was that teams stayed together. You never left a teammate behind, no matter the circumstances. "Base, Overwatch. Requesting clarification. My team is under fire. Overwatch, you will remain in position until further orders." This comes directly from Colonel Harrison. Sarah looked at Chen, seeing her own confusion and anger reflected in his expression. The sound of gunfire was growing more intense, punctuated by explosions that suggested the Taliban fighters had rocket-propelled grenades. "Chief, we need to move," Chen said quietly. "Torres and the others need our support." Sarah keyed her radio again. "Base, this is Overwatch. I am moving to support my team." "Negative, Overwatch. You will maintain position." "That's a direct order from command authority." The radio fell silent except for the tactical chatter from her teammates, who were clearly fighting for their lives. Sarah made the decision that would define the rest of her career and her life. She switched her radio to the team frequency. "Torres, this is Martinez. I'm moving to your position." "Negative, Sarah. Stay put. We've got this handled." But Sarah could hear in Torres's voice that they didn't have it handled. The gunfire was too intense, too coordinated. This wasn't a chance encounter, it was a carefully planned ambush with superior numbers and positioning. She and Chen began moving toward the sound of gunfire, using every piece of cover available in the sparse terrain. As they crested a small ridge, Sarah could see the battlefield below. Her teammates were pinned down in a shallow depression, surrounded on three sides by Taliban fighters who had clearly been waiting for them. "Chen, get on the radio and call for air support. Give them our position and tell them we need immediate close air support." "Already tried, Chief. Something's jamming our long-range communications. We can talk to each other, but nothing's getting through to headquarters." Sarah studied the tactical situation through her binoculars. The Taliban had at least 30 fighters, armed with AK-47s, machine guns, and RPGs. Her team was outnumbered and outgunned, trapped in terrain that offered minimal cover. But Sarah Martinez hadn't become a Navy SEAL by accepting impossible odds. She had become a SEAL by finding ways to turn impossible odds into mission success. "Chen, I need you to work your way around to that rocky outcrop on the north side. When I engage, you provide suppressing fire on the machine gun positions." "Chief, there's too many of them. We should fall back and try to reach the extraction point." Sarah looked at her spotter, a young sailor who had been with the teams for only 2 years. He was brave and skilled, but he hadn't yet learned that sometimes falling back meant watching your brothers die. "Those are our teammates down there, Chen. SEALs don't run when other SEALs are in trouble." She assembled her rifle with practiced efficiency, estimating ranges and wind conditions. The Taliban fighters were confident, moving in the open because they believed they had overwhelming superiority. They were about to learn that a single skilled sniper could change the dynamics of any engagement. Sarah's first shot took out the machine gunner who was pouring fire into her team's position. The second shot eliminated the spotter feeding ammunition to the machine gun. The Taliban fighters suddenly found themselves under precise, deadly fire from an unexpected direction. Through her scope, Sarah could see her teammates using the confusion to improve their positions and return more effective fire. Torres was wounded but still fighting, coordinating the team's defensive efforts with hand signals when radio communication became difficult. "Chief, I'm in position," Chen reported from the northern outcrop. "I can see at least 15 fighters moving to flank our guys. Engage the flanking force. Keep them pinned down." For the next 20 minutes, Sarah and Chen provided precision fire support that kept the Taliban from overwhelming the main team position. Sarah's kill count climbed steadily as she eliminated key targets, commanders, heavy weapons operators, and anyone who tried to coordinate the assault. But ammunition was limited, and the Taliban had reinforcements arriving. Sarah could see vehicles approaching from multiple directions, bringing fresh fighters and heavier weapons. The tactical situation was deteriorating despite their success in breaking the initial ambush. "Torres, this is Martinez. You need to move to the secondary extraction point. I'll provide cover." "Negative, Sarah. We extract together or not at all. David, listen to me. You've got wounded and you're about to be overrun. Move your team to safety." "That's not a request." The radio was quiet for a moment before Torres responded. "Copy, Martinez. Moving to secondary extraction. You and Chen follow in 5 minutes." Sarah watched through her scope as her teammates began their tactical withdrawal, moving by bounds from cover to cover while she eliminated any Taliban fighters who tried to pursue. The movement was textbook perfect, each man covering the others in a carefully coordinated sequence that had been drilled into them through countless training exercises. But, as they reached the edge of the valley, Sarah's radio crackled with a message that changed everything. "All units, this is base. New orders from Command Authority. Extraction helicopter will pick up personnel at grid coordinates 41 STE 12345, 67890. Be advised, transport capacity is limited to 6 personnel." Sarah's blood went cold. There were 8 members of the team including herself and Chen. Someone was going to be left behind. Torres's voice came through immediately. "Base, this is Bravo team leader. Confirmed transport capacity. We have 8 personnel requiring extraction. Bravo team, confirmed 6 personnel maximum. Command Authority has designated priority extraction based on mission-critical personnel." The silence on the radio stretched for long seconds before Torres responded, his voice tight with anger and disbelief. "Base, specify which personnel are designated for extraction." "Bravo team, the following personnel will board extraction aircraft: Torres, Williams, Jackson, Kowalski, Chen, and Henderson. Martinez will remain in position for alternate extraction." Sarah felt the world shift around her as the words sank in. They were leaving her behind. After 7 years of service, after proving herself in combat again and again, her own command was abandoning her in enemy territory. "Base, this is Torres. I will not leave a team member behind. Either we all extract or no one extracts. Bravo team leader, you will follow orders as given. Martinez will be extracted by alternate means. Board the aircraft when it arrives." Sarah keyed her radio, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. "Torres, you follow orders. Get the team to safety." "Sarah, no. We don't leave people behind. That's not who we are." Through her scope, Sarah could see Torres and the others had reached the extraction point. In the distance, she could hear the approaching sound of helicopter rotors. The Taliban forces were regrouping for another assault, and time was running out. "David, you listen to me. You've got wounded men who need medical attention. You get them to safety. That's your responsibility as team leader." "Sarah. That's an order, Lieutenant Commander. Get my teammates to safety." Sarah watched through her binoculars as the helicopter landed and her teammates reluctantly boarded. She could see Torres standing in the aircraft's doorway, clearly arguing with someone inside. The argument lasted almost a full minute before the helicopter lifted off, carrying her teammates to safety and leaving her alone in hostile territory. As the sound of the rotors faded into the distance, Sarah finally allowed herself to process what had just happened. She was a decorated Navy SEAL with 7 years of combat experience, and her own command had just hung her out to dry. The alternate extraction they had promised was clearly never coming. Chen's voice crackled through her radio.
Chief, I stayed behind. I'm about half a mile north of your position.
Sarah closed her eyes, feeling a mixture of relief and despair. At least she wasn't completely alone, but now two of them were stranded instead of one.
Chen, why didn't you board that helicopter?
Because seals don't leave other seals behind, Chief.
My grandfather didn't raise me to abandon my teammates.
Sarah smiled for the first time since the mission had gone wrong. Chen was young, but he understood what it meant to be a SEAL better than the commanders who had just abandoned them.
All right, Chen. Let's figure out how we're going to get home.
But, even as she spoke the words, Sarah could hear vehicles approaching from multiple directions. The Taliban knew they were in the area, and they would be bringing overwhelming force to capture or kill the remaining Americans. Sarah Martinez had survived impossible odds before, but she had never faced them while being hunted by both the enemy and abandoned by her own command. The desert was about to become either her graveyard or the place where she proved that being a SEAL meant more than following orders from people who had forgotten what honor meant. The sound of approaching vehicles grew louder as Sarah and Chen retreated deeper into the rocky terrain. 3 pickup trucks mounted with heavy machine guns were converging on their last known position, while Taliban fighters on foot moved through the canyon below.
Sarah estimated at least 50 enemy combatants were now hunting them across a 10-square-mile area. Chen, what's our ammunition status?
Sarah whispered into her radio as they took cover behind a cluster of boulders. I've got maybe 40 rounds for my rifle, plus 3 magazines for my sidearm.
You? Sarah did a quick inventory.
68 rifle rounds, 4 magazines for my pistol, and 2 fragmentation grenades. It wasn't much for a sustained firefight, but it would have to be enough. Through her binoculars, Sarah watched the Taliban fighters spreading out in a search pattern.
They were being methodical, professional. This wasn't a ragtag militia group, these were experienced fighters who understood small unit tactics. Someone had trained them well, which made the situation exponentially more dangerous.
Chief, we need to talk about the elephant in the room, Chen said quietly.
Why did command order us to be left behind?
Sarah had been asking herself the same question since the helicopter departed. In 7 years of service, she had never seen or heard of a SEAL being deliberately abandoned in enemy territory. The ethos of the teams was built on the fundamental promise that no one gets left behind, regardless of the circumstances.
I don't know, Chen. But we're going to find out when we get home. If we get home. Sarah studied the terrain around them.
They were positioned on a ridge that offered good visibility but limited cover. To the east, the land sloped down into a valley that led toward Pakistani territory, neutral ground where they might find sanctuary. To the west, the terrain became increasingly mountainous, offering better concealment but extending their distance from any potential rescue. Her radio crackled with an encrypted transmission on a frequency that shouldn't have been accessible to Taliban forces.
Martinez, this is Colonel Harrison. Respond. Sarah hesitated before answering.
Colonel Harrison was the officer who had ordered the mission abort and subsequent abandonment. Talking to him meant revealing their position to anyone monitoring communications.
This is Martinez. Martinez, I need you to listen carefully.
Your mission parameters have changed. You are now classified as a rogue operator conducting unauthorized combat operations.
Surrender to local authorities immediately.
The words hit Sarah like a physical blow.
Rogue operator.
They were painting her as someone who had gone off mission, disobeyed orders, and endangered American lives. It was a complete fabrication, but it explained why she had been left behind. Colonel, I followed my team into a combat situation where they were under fire.
That's standard operating procedure.
Martinez, you were ordered to maintain position. Your disobedience of direct orders resulted in the compromise of classified mission parameters. You will surrender immediately or face the consequences of your actions.
Sarah looked at Chen, who was staring at her with growing understanding.
They weren't just stranded, they were being set up. Someone wanted them captured or killed, and they were willing to destroy Sarah's reputation to make it happen.
Chen, switch to frequency 7.
We're going dark on command communications. After changing frequencies, Chen's voice was tight with anger.
Chief, they're burning us.
Someone high up wants us gone, and they're making it look like we went rogue.
Sarah's mind raced through the possible explanations.
The mission abort had been suspicious from the start. The intelligence on Hakeem's location had been solid, she had positive identification through her scope.
The civilian threat that prompted the abort had been non-existent.
And the ambush that followed had been too well coordinated to be coincidental.
Chen, what if the mission was never about killing Hakeem? What if it was about getting our team into that ambush? You think someone wanted our whole team dead?
I think someone wanted me dead, and the team was collateral damage.
When the ambush failed to kill everyone, they improvised and left us behind.
The sound of vehicles had stopped, but Sarah could hear voices echoing off the canyon walls. The Taliban fighters were conducting a systematic search, moving from position to position with military precision. They would find the hiding spot eventually.
We need to move.
There's a cave system about 2 miles north of here. If we can reach it before dark, we can establish a defensive position and figure out our next move. Moving during daylight was dangerous, but staying in their current position was suicide. Sarah and Chen began a careful withdrawal, using every piece of cover available while avoiding the search teams below. The temperature was climbing toward 120 degrees, and dehydration would become a critical factor within hours. As they moved through the rocky terrain, Sarah's radio intercepted Taliban communications in Pashto. Her language training allowed her to understand most of what they were saying, and the intelligence was disturbing.
Chen, they're not just looking for us randomly. Someone gave them detailed information about our capabilities, our equipment, and our likely escape routes. Inside information? Has to be.
They know I'm a sniper, they know you're my spotter, and they know we're both SEAL qualified.
That's not information they could have gathered during the firefight. The implication was staggering.
Someone within the American military or intelligence community was actively working with Taliban forces to eliminate Sarah Martinez.
The question was why.
They reached a narrow ravine that offered concealment from aerial observation but channeled their movement in a predictable direction. Sarah made the tactical decision to follow the ravine despite the risk, gambling that speed was more important than unpredictability. 20 minutes later, her gamble nearly got them killed. The ravine opened into a small valley where 3 Taliban fighters were waiting in ambush positions. They had predicted Sarah's route and moved to intercept. Only Chen's sharp eyes saved them from walking into a kill zone. "Contact front, 3 fighters in concealed positions," Chen whispered. Sarah studied the tactical situation through her scope. The fighters were well positioned with overlapping fields of fire. A direct assault would be suicidal, but there was no alternate route that wouldn't cost them precious time they didn't have.
I'm going to eliminate the 2 on the left. You take the one on the right. On my mark. Sarah's rifle was a precision instrument, capable of delivering lethal force at extreme range with mathematical accuracy.
At this distance, barely 400 meters, missing was not a possibility. Her first shot took out the machine gunner positioned behind a fallen log. Her second shot eliminated his assistant before he could react. Chen's shot was perfectly timed, dropping the 3rd fighter as he tried to acquire targets through his rifle scope. The engagement lasted less than 10 seconds, but it confirmed Sarah's worst fears. The Taliban weren't just searching randomly, they were anticipating her movements with inside knowledge of SEAL tactics and procedures. As they moved through the now clear valley, Sarah spotted something that made her blood run cold. One of the dead Taliban fighters was carrying an American military radio, pre-programmed with encrypted frequencies that should have been known only to SEAL teams.
Chen, look at this.
Chen examined the radio, his expression growing darker by the moment.
Chief, this is current encryption.
This radio was programmed within the last 48 hours.
Which means someone with access to current SEAL communications gave it to the Taliban.
The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, painting a picture of betrayal that reached into the highest levels of the military command structure. Sarah Martinez wasn't just fighting for survival against Taliban forces, she was fighting against elements within her own military who wanted her eliminated. They reached the cave system as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. The caves provided excellent defensive positions with multiple escape routes, but they also represented a dead end if they were discovered and surrounded. Sarah established a watch rotation while Chen worked on their long-range communications equipment, trying to reach friendly forces who might not be part of the conspiracy against them. The radio crackled with various transmissions, most of them routine military communications that revealed nothing useful. But then, Chen picked up something that changed everything.
Chief, you need to hear this.
It's a conversation between Colonel Harrison and someone identified as Asset 7. Sarah put on the headset and listened to a conversation that confirmed her darkest suspicions.
Asset 7, the Martinez problem needs to be resolved tonight.
She's too skilled to remain at large for extended periods.
Understood.
My teams are converging on her probable location.
What about the spotter? Eliminate him as well. We can't afford witnesses to tonight's operations. And if they somehow escape the immediate area? They won't. I've made sure that no American forces will respond to any distress calls from their position. As far as official records show, Master Chief Martinez went rogue and disappeared into Taliban territory. Sarah removed the headset, her hands trembling with rage.
Colonel Harrison wasn't just abandoning her, he was actively coordinating with Taliban forces to ensure her death. The betrayal went beyond anything she could have imagined.
Chen, we're not dealing with a military command mistake. We're dealing with active treason at high levels. What do you want to do, Chief?
Sarah looked out at the desert landscape where enemy forces were closing in on their position. She thought about her 7 years of service, the teammates who trusted her, and the oath she had sworn to defend America against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
We're going to survive this night, Chen.
And then, we're going to make sure the people responsible for this betrayal face justice. But, even as she spoke the words, Sarah could see vehicle lights in the distance, moving in coordinated patterns that suggested a large-scale operation was beginning. The Taliban forces were being supported by someone with detailed knowledge of American military tactics, and they were preparing for a final assault on the cave system. Sarah Martinez had survived impossible odds before, but she had never faced them while being actively betrayed by her own command structure. The night ahead would test everything she had learned about warfare, survival, and the true meaning of honor. As darkness fell over the Afghan desert, Sarah began preparing for what might be her final battle. But she was determined that if she was going to die, she would take enough enemies with her to send a message that Americans don't go quietly into the night, even when their own people try to send them there. The desert wind carried the sound of approaching vehicles and the distant voices of men who believed they were hunting cornered prey. They were about to learn that a cornered Navy SEAL is the most dangerous predator in any environment, especially when she has nothing left to lose except her honor and her life. The assault on the cave system began at 2,147 hours with mortar fire that shook dust from the ancient rock formations. Sarah and Chen had prepared as well as possible given their limited resources, establishing multiple defensive positions within the cave network and creating improvised explosive devices from their remaining grenades and salvaged Taliban equipment.
They're probing the main entrance, Chen reported from his observation post.
I count at least 20 fighters, with more moving around to flank positions. Sarah was positioned deeper in the cave system, where a narrow passage created a natural choke point. Her rifle was zeroed for the 150-meter engagement distance, and she had prepared range cards for every possible firing position. If the Taliban wanted to take these caves, they would pay a heavy price in blood. The first wave of attackers moved cautiously into the cave entrance, using tactical lights and night vision equipment that was clearly of American origin. Sarah allowed them to penetrate 50 meters into the cave system before triggering her first improvised explosive device. The explosion collapsed part of the entrance tunnel, trapping 3 Taliban fighters inside while blocking the primary access route. The screams of wounded men echoed through the cave system, a grim reminder that war is never clean or glorious, regardless of which side claims righteousness.
Chen, report.
Secondary entrance is still clear, but I can see vehicles positioning for another assault.
Chief, they've got heavy weapons out there.
RPGs, maybe even a recoilless rifle.
Sarah moved to a different firing position as automatic weapons fire began probing into the cave system.
The Taliban fighters were being more cautious now, having learned that their opponents were skilled and prepared for a siege. Her radio intercepted another conversation between Colonel Harrison and Asset 7 that revealed the scope of the conspiracy against her.
Asset 7, status report on the cave assault.
Initial probe was repelled with significant casualties. The targets are well prepared and using advanced tactics.
How long until you can confirm elimination? Unknown.
They've established defensive positions that will require significant resources to overcome. My recommendation is to seal the caves and wait for them to run out of supplies.
Negative. This needs to be resolved tonight. Too many people are asking questions about Martinez's disappearance. Sarah realized that her apparent death needed to happen quickly to prevent an investigation that might expose the conspiracy. Someone with significant power was worried that her survival might reveal uncomfortable truths about American military operations in Afghanistan. The second assault came at midnight, coordinated from multiple directions with professional military precision. Taliban fighters advanced through secondary cave entrances while heavy weapons suppressed the main defensive positions. Someone had provided them with detailed intelligence about the cave system's layout. Sarah's first shot eliminated a Taliban commander who was coordinating the assault through a military-grade radio. Her second shot took out a machine gunner who was providing covering fire for advancing infantry. But, for every fighter she eliminated, 2 more seemed to take his place. "Chen, I need you to fall back to position 3. They're trying to flank through the eastern passage." "Moving now, Chief." Sarah heard the distinctive sound of Chen's rifle engaging targets in the eastern tunnel, followed by the explosion of their second improvised device. The Taliban assault faltered as fighters found themselves trapped in a kill zone with no escape routes. But ammunition was becoming critically low, and the enemy had unlimited reinforcements. Sarah estimated that she had perhaps 30 rounds remaining for her rifle, plus limited pistol ammunition. Against an enemy force that numbered in the hundreds, those rounds would need to count for everything. At 0300 hours, the Taliban changed tactics. Instead of direct assault, they began using smoke grenades and coordinated suppressing fire to advance systematically through the cave system. The approach was methodical, professional, and exactly what Sarah would have recommended if she were planning the assault. "Chen, they're using American small unit tactics. Someone's been training them specifically for this type of operation. Or someone American is directing the assault." The thought had occurred to Sarah as well. The tactical coordination was too sophisticated for Taliban fighters, regardless of their experience level. Someone with advanced military training was directing this operation, possibly from inside the cave system itself. Sarah's suspicions were confirmed when she heard English being spoken in one of the side passages. The voice was American, giving detailed instructions about cave-clearing procedures that were classified SEAL tactics. "Chen, we've got American personnel directing this assault. Switch to hand signals only." Sarah moved silently through the cave system, using natural acoustics to track the location of the American voice. What she found horrified her beyond anything she had experienced in 7 years of combat operations. Through a gap in the rock formations, she could see a man in civilian clothes coordinating the Taliban assault using military maps and advanced communications equipment. He was clearly American, probably military or intelligence, and he was actively directing enemy forces against his own countrymen. Sarah had a clear shot at approximately 80 meters, but taking it would reveal her position to the dozen Taliban fighters surrounding the American operative. She made the tactical decision to gather intelligence instead of engaging immediately. The American was talking into a satellite phone, reporting to someone with the codename Prometheus. His words were quietly spoken but audible in the cave's acoustics. "Prometheus, the targets are more resourceful than anticipated. We may need to consider alternative elimination methods." Negative. It needs to look like they were killed in combat with Taliban forces. Any other outcome raises questions we can't afford to answer. Understood. We'll maintain the assault until we have confirmed kills. Sarah retreated to Chen's position with intelligence that changed everything about their situation. They weren't just fighting Taliban forces, they were fighting a coordinated operation involving American personnel who had orders to ensure their deaths. "Chen, we need to break out of these caves. We're not fighting just Taliban anymore. Where can we go? The entire area is crawling with hostiles." Sarah studied the tactical situation. Breaking out would mean fighting through superior numbers in open terrain with minimal ammunition. Staying would mean slowly being ground down by an enemy with unlimited resources and detailed knowledge of their defensive positions. But there was a third option that might work if they could execute it perfectly. "Chen, what if we don't run from them? What if we hunt them instead?" Sarah's plan was audacious and probably suicidal, but it was based on a fundamental principle of special operations: when facing superior numbers, change the rules of engagement. Instead of defending fixed positions, they would become the hunters, using their superior training and knowledge to eliminate key enemy personnel. "We're going to take out their command structure. Starting with that American who's directing the assault." They moved through the cave system using routes that Sarah had memorized during their initial reconnaissance.
The Taliban fighters were focused on the main defensive positions, not expecting their targets to go on the offensive.
Sarah reached a position where she had a clear shot at the American operative.
Through her scope, she could see him clearly, a man in his 40s, military bearing, probably former special operations himself. He was coordinating the assault with professional competence, treating the elimination of 2 SEALs as a routine military operation.
Her shot was perfect, a center mass hit that dropped the operative instantly.
The immediate effect was chaos among the Taliban fighters, who suddenly found themselves without American direction and coordination.
Chen, execute phase 2. Take out their communications.
Chen moved to a position overlooking the Taliban command post and eliminated the radio operators with precision rifle fire. Without communications or American leadership, the assault began to falter as individual Taliban commanders made conflicting decisions about how to proceed. Sarah and Chen used the confusion to execute a fighting withdrawal from the cave system, eliminating key Taliban personnel while moving toward the secondary exit. Their ammunition was nearly exhausted, but they had broken the enemy's tactical organization. As they emerged from the caves into the pre-dawn darkness, Sarah could see the full scope of the operation arrayed against them. More than 200 Taliban fighters, dozens of vehicles, and sophisticated military equipment that could only have come from American sources. But something had changed in the tactical situation. The coordinated assault had become a confused search operation as individual Taliban commanders tried to re-establish control without their American advisors. Sarah's radio crackled with an unexpected transmission on a frequency she recognized from her original SEAL team.
Any SEAL personnel, this is Torres. Respond if you can hear this transmission. Sarah looked at Chen, hardly daring to hope that their teammates might be attempting a rescue operation.
But Torres was supposed to be back at base, following orders and accepting the official story about their abandonment.
Torres, this is Martinez.
What's your status?
Sarah. Thank God you're alive. We're coming for you. Negative, David.
This area is crawling with hostiles, and you don't have authorization for rescue operations.
Sarah, authorization can go to hell. No one leaves a SEAL behind.
We've got air support and a full extraction team.
Send us your coordinates.
Sarah felt tears she hadn't realized were building finally overflow. Her teammates hadn't abandoned her after all.
Despite direct orders from Colonel Harrison, they were risking their careers and their lives to bring her home.
But, even as relief flooded through her, Sarah realized that her teammates' rescue attempt would expose them to the same conspiracy that had targeted her.
Colonel Harrison and his associates couldn't afford to have witnesses to their betrayal survive.
Torres, you need to know that American personnel are directing Taliban forces against us. This goes all the way up the command structure.
The radio was silent for several seconds before Torres responded. Copy that, Sarah.
We figured something was wrong when they tried to court-martial us for demanding a rescue operation. The whole team is here, and we've got some friends who believe your story.
How many friends?
Let's just say that betraying Navy SEALs tends to make people angry, even people who outrank colonels. Sarah looked out at the desert where dawn was beginning to break over the mountains. Taliban forces were regrouping for another assault, but now she had hoped that her teammates were coming. The question was whether they could survive long enough for rescue to arrive.
Torres, we're going to need immediate air support.
We've got approximately 200 hostiles with heavy weapons, and they know we're trying to extract.
Air support is already en route. F-18s with full ordnance loads, plus a Spectre gunship for close support. ETA 15 minutes. Sarah smiled for the first time in 18 hours.
The Taliban forces that had been hunting her were about to learn what American air power could do when properly motivated. But she also knew that the American personnel directing the Taliban assault wouldn't give up easily. They had too much to lose if the truth about their betrayal became public knowledge. 3 months after her rescue from the Afghan desert, Master Chief Sarah Martinez sat in a secure conference room at the Pentagon, facing a panel of generals, admirals, and civilian prosecutors who had spent weeks investigating the conspiracy that nearly cost her life. The evidence she and Chen had gathered during their desperate night in the caves had become the foundation of the largest military corruption investigation in decades. Colonel Harrison sat at the defendant's table in shackles, his military decorations stripped away and his career destroyed by the weight of evidence against him. Beside him sat 6 other officers and 3 civilian contractors who had participated in what prosecutors called Operation Sandstorm, an illegal network of weapons trafficking, intelligence manipulation, and proxy warfare conducted through Taliban intermediaries. Master Chief Martinez, said General Patricia Hayes, who was serving as the senior military officer on the investigative panel. Please describe for the record what happened after your team was ordered to abort the mission against Rashid Hakim. Sarah had testified for 3 days, providing detailed accounts of every aspect of the betrayal she had experienced. Her testimony was corroborated by radio intercepts, physical evidence, and statements from Taliban prisoners who had agreed to cooperate in exchange for protection from Harrison's associates. General, after we received the abort order, my team was deliberately directed into an ambush zone where Taliban forces were waiting with American weapons and intelligence. When the ambush failed to eliminate all team members, I was ordered to be left behind during the extraction to prevent testimony about what we had witnessed.
And what had you witnessed, Master Chief?
American military personnel coordinating directly with Taliban forces to conduct operations that were not authorized by CENTCOM or any legitimate American command authority. The investigation had revealed that Colonel Harrison's group had been operating independently for over 2 years, conducting what they claimed were off-the-books counterterrorism operations. In reality, they had been running weapons to selected Taliban factions, manipulating intelligence reports to justify continued military presence in Afghanistan, and eliminating American personnel who discovered their activities. Sarah's near-death experience had been the culmination of their operations, an attempt to silence a witness whose skills and integrity made her too dangerous to ignore. But the conspiracy had grown too large and too reckless to remain hidden, especially after involving dozens of American military personnel in attempts to eliminate their own teammates. Master Chief, said Assistant Attorney General Rebecca Walsh, the lead prosecutor for the Justice Department.
How many American service members do you estimate were involved in the conspiracy against you?
Ma'am, based on the radio intercepts and tactical coordination we observed, I estimate at least 30 American personnel had knowledge of or participated in the attempt to eliminate my team. The scope of the conspiracy had shocked everyone involved in the investigation. What had started as a small group of officers conducting unauthorized operations had grown into a network that included personnel from multiple military branches and intelligence agencies. But the investigation had also revealed something else that gave Sarah hope for the future of American military service. For every person involved in the conspiracy, there were dozens of others who had refused to participate despite pressure from superior officers. Torres and his team had risked court-martial to attempt her rescue. Admiral Morrison had used his authority to support them despite direct orders from compromise officials. General Hayes had personally led the final rescue operation when she learned about the betrayal. Master Chief Martinez, said Admiral Morrison, his voice carrying the weight of decades of honorable service.
What lessons do you believe the military should learn from this incident?
Sarah had thought about that question every day since her rescue. The betrayal had shaken her faith in the military hierarchy, but it had also reinforced her belief in the fundamental values that most American service members held sacred. Admiral, I believe this incident demonstrates that following orders is not enough if those orders violate our oath to support and defend the Constitution. Every service member has a responsibility to question authority when that authority appears to be compromised by corruption or illegal activity. The recommendation that emerged from Sarah's testimony became known as the Martinez Protocol, a formal procedure for service members to report suspected illegal activities by superior officers without fear of retaliation. It included protections for whistleblowers and independent oversight to prevent the kind of conspiracy that had nearly killed her. But the most significant outcome of the investigation wasn't procedural or legal, it was personal. Petty Officer Jake Chan received a Navy Cross for his actions during the desert survival and his refusal to abandon his teammate despite direct orders. Torres and the rest of their SEAL team received formal commendations for their rescue operation and their courage in defying corrupt authority. Sarah herself received something she valued more than any medal, complete vindication and a formal apology from the Secretary of Defense for the betrayal she had suffered. But perhaps the most important recognition came from an unexpected source. During the final day of testimony, Sarah was approached by Rashid Hakim's brother, who had been among the Taliban fighters evacuated during the rescue operation. Master Chief Martinez, he said through a translator, my brother told me that you spared his life when you could have killed him, even after he tried to kill you. Sarah remembered the moment during the cave fighting when she had chosen to gather intelligence instead of taking the shot that would have eliminated Hakim's military advisor.
That decision had ultimately provided critical evidence for the investigation.
Your decision to show mercy when you could have chosen revenge has changed how my people view American soldiers, the translator continued. My brother has agreed to provide information about other corrupt American personnel who are working with Taliban forces. The intelligence provided by Hakim and other Taliban fighters led to additional arrests and the dismantling of several other illegal operations that had been conducted under the cover of legitimate military activities. 6 months after her testimony concluded, Sarah stood on the deck of a Navy destroyer in the Persian Gulf, watching the sun set over waters that had seen too much conflict and too little peace. She had been promoted to Senior Chief Petty Officer and assigned to a new position training the next generation of Navy SEALs. Her experiences in the Afghan desert had become part of the curriculum at SEAL training schools, not as a story of heroic action, but as a case study in ethical decision-making under extreme pressure. New SEAL candidates learned about the Martinez incident as an example of how corruption could penetrate even elite military units, and how individual integrity could overcome institutional failures. Chen had requested assignment to her training unit, saying that he had learned more about being a SEAL during one night in those caves than he had in all his previous military service. Their partnership had become legendary within the special operations community, proof that loyalty and courage could overcome any obstacle. Torres had been promoted to commander and given command of a SEAL team that specialized in counter-corruption operations, working to identify and eliminate illegal activities within American military units worldwide. His refusal to abandon Sarah had become the foundation of a career dedicated to ensuring that betrayal like hers never happened again. As Sarah watched dolphins playing in the ship's wake, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 7 years earlier, she had joined the Navy SEALs to serve her country and protect American lives. She had never imagined that some of her greatest challenges would come from within her own military. But she had also discovered something about the true meaning of service that went beyond following orders or completing missions. Real service meant standing up for what was right, even when authority figures demanded compromise. It meant choosing loyalty to principles over loyalty to individuals, no matter how high their rank or how severe the consequences of defying them. Her radio crackled with a message from the ship's communications center. Senior Chief Martinez, you have an encrypted message from SEAL Command. Sarah made her way to the communications center, wondering what new challenge awaited her. The message was from Admiral Morrison, offering her command of a new unit dedicated to investigating corruption within Special Operations Forces. Your experiences have given you unique qualifications for this assignment, the message read. We need leaders who have proven they will choose integrity over convenience, even when facing life or death consequences. Sarah smiled as she read the offer. The conspiracy that had tried to destroy her had ultimately created an opportunity to prevent similar betrayals from happening to other service members. Her survival had become the foundation for systemic changes that would protect future generations of American warriors. She typed her response, Admiral, I accept the assignment. When do I start? But, even as she embraced her new mission, Sarah knew that the fight against corruption would never be completely won. There would always be individuals who placed personal gain above duty, who saw military service as an opportunity for profit rather than a calling to protect others. The difference was that now there were systems in place to identify and stop them before they could betray the trust placed in them by the American people and the service members under their command. As she walked back to the ship's deck, Sarah thought about the Taliban fighters who had tried to kill her in those caves, following orders from American personnel who had no right to give them. Some of those fighters had become valuable allies in the fight against corruption, proving that enemies could become partners when united by a commitment to justice. The desert had tested everything she believed about honor, duty, and loyalty. It had shown her that some enemies were the same uniform she wore, while some allies might be found among those she had been trained to fight. But, most importantly, it had taught her that the oath she had sworn as a Navy SEAL wasn't just about defending America from foreign enemies, it was about defending the values that made America worth defending, even when that meant standing against fellow Americans who had forgotten what those values meant. The sun disappeared below the horizon, painting the sky in colors that reminded Sarah of the Afghan desert where her greatest challenge had become her greatest victory. Tomorrow would bring new missions, new challenges, and new opportunities to serve with the integrity that had brought her through the longest night of her life. She had learned that SEALs never leave teammates behind, even when their own command orders them to do so. She had learned that courage isn't about following orders blindly, but about making the right choice when all the easy options have been taken away. Most importantly, she had learned that some battles are worth fighting regardless of the odds, especially when the enemy is betrayal itself and the prize is the honor of those who serve.